We grow up looking at atlases, and we get this deeply ingrained idea that boundaries are precise.
Right, like they're absolute.
Exactly. You look at a map and you see that solid black line separating two countries, or, that dotted line dividing two states, and it feels like an engineering marvel.
Oh, completely.
It's just you're either inside or you're outside. It's clean and orderly.
Which is a deeply comforting illusion, honestly. I mean, we crave that binary categorization to make sense of the world.
Yeah.
We want to know exactly where the edge is and who is standing on the other side.
Right. But if you step into how the world actually operates today, May 4, 2026, those lines on the map are entirely useless.
Pretty much.
Right now, we have 850 commercial cargo ships physically trapped in a Middle Eastern waterway while a U.S. president is threatening military intervention.
Yeah, it's a massive crisis.
We have the world's largest democracy testing the absolute limits of its electoral machinery. I mean, we are looking at a landscape of boundaries that is constantly shifting, being fiercely negotiated, or in some cases, just violently redrawn.
Because control is never, it's never a static state. It requires continuous, active enforcement.
Always.
The very moment a governing body or a nation state stops enforcing the line, it just disappears.
And that is exactly what we are exploring today. So, welcome to today's deep dive. We are thrilled you're with us.
Definitely.
We have a really heavy stack of sources to get through today, spanning everything from local Indian state elections to global blockades.
That's a lot.
It is a lot. And our mission is to decode all of it for you through this lens of boundaries and breakthroughs. But a quick rule of the road before we jump in.
Good idea.
Our sources today touch on some highly charged political events, both domestically and internationally. And we want to be clear, we are here to impartially report the facts exactly as they exist in the material provided.
Right. We're not taking sides.
No sides, no endorsing political viewpoints. We are simply your guides, breaking down the underlying mechanics of these events.
Our focus is strictly on understanding how these systems and strategies function under extreme pressure.
So let's start with the ultimate pressure test of domestic governance. Today is counting day for the Election Commission of India.
A massive undertaking.
Huge. We are looking at a sprawling democratic exercise across Assam, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, West Bengal, Puducherry, and several crucial by-elections.
Yeah.
But, the listener already knows the headlines.
Yeah.
What I want to understand is the physical reality of this day, because the ECI's primary message in our sources is, quote, full transparency and heavy security.
Right.
What does that actually look like on the ground?
Well, honestly, it looks like a paramilitary operation.
Wow, really?
Yeah. You have to understand the sheer logistical vulnerability of a counting center. You've got thousands of electronic voting machines or EVMs stored in these strong rooms.
Right.
And the boundary between a fair election and a compromised one is entirely defined by the physical security of that single room.
Makes sense.
So the ECI implements this incredibly strict three-tier security cordon. The innermost perimeter is guarded by central armed police forces.
Okay.
The middle tier is handled by the state armed police, and then the outer perimeter is managed by the local district police.
Which, that implies a distinct lack of trust in the local authorities to handle it alone, right?
Absolutely.
And that lack of trust is basically screaming off the page when we look at West Bengal. The tension there is described in the sources as fiercely contested.
Very much so.
The Trinamool Congress is fighting for a fourth consecutive term against the BJP's aggressive push for Paraborton or change, while the Left Front and Congress try to survive.
Right.
The ECI has actually deployed 165 additional counting observers and 77 police observers to the state. Plus, they ordered a repoll in Falta for May 25.
Which is unprecedented.
Right. So how does an additional counting observer actually function? Are they just standing around with clipboards?
Oh, far from it. An additional counting observer is usually a senior civil servant, and they are deliberately brought in from outside the state.
Okay, so they're completely independent.
Exactly. They act as the central authority's physical proxy. Their job is to monitor the absolute micromechanics of the count.
Give me an example.
Well, when a strong room is opened, they are physically watching the unbroken seals. When an EVM is brought to a table, they verify the unique serial number against the master list to ensure it hasn't been swapped out.
Wow. They're checking serial numbers live.
Yes. They are watching the returning officers, and they are managing the political agents who are, breathing down everyone's necks.
It sounds chaotic.
It is. So when you flood a state with 165 of them, the ECI is basically acknowledging a very high probability of institutional interference.
They're building a human firewall.
Exactly. They're trying to mandate integrity through sheer surveillance.
But, in other states, the battle isn't just about the integrity of the count, it's about the total failure of the political polling models themselves.
Oh, definitely.
Let's look at Assam. The assembly has 126 seats. So, mathematically, 64 secures a majority.
Right.
Yet today, the BJP-led NDA's chief minister, Himanta Biswa Sarma, is publicly predicting they will capture nearly 100 seats.
Bold claim.
Right. But simultaneously, the Congress-led front, the Azam Sanmalito Morcha with Gaurav Gogoi, is claiming they will easily cross that 64-seat threshold.
Yeah.
I mean, mathematically, someone's internal data is completely broken.
Well, I would actually argue their data might be fine.
Wait, what? How?
Because their public posture serves a completely different mechanism. On counting day, projecting absolute victory isn't really about telling the truth.
Then what is it about?
It's about managing the psychology of your counting agents on the floor.
Oh, I see.
If a party admits the race is tight or that they might be losing, their agents at the tables might lose focus.
Right, they might get demoralized.
Exactly. They might stop contesting borderline invalid postal ballots, or honestly, they might just pack up and go home.
Wow.
So the leaders project this overwhelming confidence to keep their ground troops mobilized until the very final machine is tabulated. It's pure operational theater.
That is fascinating. It's like you have to keep the troops on the front line believing they are winning.
Precisely.
And we're seeing similar high-stakes tension in the southern states, too. Kerala saw a massive 79.7% turnout.
Huge numbers.
Yeah, the incumbent LDF and the NDA are holding firm there, even as the exit polls suggest a UDF comeback. But the true systemic disruption, according to our sources, is happening in Tamil Nadu.
Yes, Tamil Nadu is arguably the most compelling case study in this entire election cycle.
How so?
It's a perfect example of how established political boundaries can be entirely bypassed.
Right, so we have 4.87 crore voters participating, which is an 85.0% turnout. And historically, this state operates on a very strict duopoly, right?
Yes, the ruling DMK, led by Chief Minister M.K. Stalin, versus the AIADMK, led by Edapadi K. Palaniswamy.
But this cycle is different. Actor C. Joseph Vijay has launched the Tamilaga Vetri Kazhagam, the TVK. And the sources say this isn't just some vanity project. It is actively threatening to dismantle those legacy vote banks.
It is a serious threat.
But how exactly does a movie star bypass all the decades of grassroots organization required to build a functioning political party?
By weaponizing existing fan club infrastructure.
Weaponizing fan clubs.
Yeah. In South Indian cinema culture, a leading actor's Razagar Mangram, or fan club network, operates almost exactly like a political party's cadre system.
Wait, really? Like structurally?
Structurally, yes. They have local district leaders, they organize massive charity drives, they mobilize thousands of people for movie releases.
Oh, wow.
And they have this deep emotional loyalty to the central figure.
Right.
So when Vijay transitions to politics, he doesn't have to build a ground game from scratch. He simply flips a switch, and his fan clubs instantly become a highly motivated, pre-existing political canvassing network.
I see the mechanical advantage there. It's literally a plug-and-play political machine.
Exactly.
But I have to push back a little here. Operating a fan club is about promoting a brand. Running a state government requires, intense administrative competence, policy formulation, navigating massive bureaucracies.
Oh, absolutely.
Does star power actually translate into the ability to govern? Or does it just create a chaotic spoiler effect that damages the established parties?
And that is the exact vulnerability of the TVK model.
Right.
Star power guarantees initial momentum, it guarantees massive rally attendance.
Sure.
And it guarantees you will disrupt the established models, which we also see down in Puducherry, by the way, where the TVK is fielding candidates across all constituencies in an already really tight race between the NDA and the NDA bloc.
Yeah.
But you are absolutely correct that mobilizing crowds does not equate to bureaucratic competence.
It's totally different.
The systemic danger is that a celebrity party pulls enough vote share to deny either legacy party a clean majority.
Leaving a fractured mandate.
It's exactly. Resulting in a completely unstable coalition government that really struggles to execute any actual policy.
So it's the ultimate test of whether the electorate values administrative continuity over the allure of a completely new, untested brand.
Very well put.
So we have these massive state machineries functioning to capture the will of millions. But governance isn't just the macro-level tabulation of votes.
No, it's not.
The fundamental contract of any government is micro-level, keeping its citizens physically safe.
Right.
And our sources detail a pretty horrific incident in Maharashtra that reveals what happens when that fundamental boundary of safety is breached.
Yes. Elections represent the theoretical framework of democracy. Law and order is the daily, visceral reality of it.
Absolutely.
And when the state fails at that basic level, the entire social contract shatters.
The sources outline the brutal murder of a 5-year-old girl in Mumbai's Dharavi area. Her body was found after she was reported missing, and the details are just deeply disturbing.
It's awful.
Her father is demanding the death penalty for the accused. But this stopped being just a localized criminal tragedy at the exact moment the community took to the streets.
Right, it escalated.
The residents organized a procession carrying the young girl's body in mourning and protest. And the police response was a lengthy charge to disperse the crowd.
Yes.
Explain the mechanics of this escalation to me. How does a police force decide to use physical violence against grieving citizens?
It is a catastrophic failure of community policing doctrine.
Okay.
In highly dense, historically marginalized areas like Dharavi, the relationship between the police and the residents is often already incredibly fraught.
Right. There's not a lot of baseline trust.
Exactly. So when a child is murdered, the community's grief is intertwined with a profound sense of abandonment by the state.
Yeah.
The procession wasn't just a funeral. It was an indictment of the police's failure to protect the vulnerable.
And how do the police view that procession?
From the police command perspective, large, emotionally charged crowds represent an immediate threat to public order, regardless of the cause.
Even a funeral procession.
Even a funeral. They rely on standard operating procedures designed for riots, not bereavement.
So they literally treat grief as a public order violation.
And precisely. The police prioritize the rapid clearance of the streets over the psychological need of the community to mourn collectively.
Wow.
The lengthy charge is a very blunt instrument, and when you deploy it against a grieving family, it just confirms the community's worst fears.
Which are what?
That the state views them not as citizens to be protected, but as an unruly population to be suppressed.
And the political opposition immediately seized on this systemic breakdown. Shiv Sena, UBT MP Sanjay Rao, launched a really blistering attack.
80%.
He called the administration useless and incompetent. He even stated the real accused is the government itself. He directly targeted Chief Minister Eknath Shinde and Deputy Chief Minister Devendra Fadnavis, who manages the home portfolio. He's basically arguing this isn't an isolated incident, but the direct result of a deteriorating law and order apparatus under their specific watch.
Rot is employing a very classic political mechanism here, linking a specific emotional tragedy to a broader narrative of administrative rot.
Right.
By calling the government the real accused, he's trying to shift the boundary of culpability.
From the individual criminal to the state.
Exactly. He is arguing that if the Home Ministry fails to create an environment of deterrence, if criminals feel emboldened because policing is weak or distracted by political maneuvering, then the ultimate blame rests at the very top of the chain of command.
It raises a really vital question about accountability. Once a community has been failed by the system and then physically beaten by that same system for protesting the failure, how do you mathematically rebuild trust?
It feels impossible.
It really does. It feels like an impossible equation.
It is incredibly difficult because trust in institutions is built incrementally but destroyed instantly.
Yeah.
Restoring it requires stripping away the bureaucratic defensiveness. It requires the state to admit fault, to transparently overhaul local policing protocols, and to demonstrate that justice is swift and blind.
And without that,
The community simply withdraws and relies on extrajudicial means for security.
which is a terrifying prospect. I mean, we're talking about the immediate physical survival of citizens, but our sources also highlight a complete different kind of survival battle, one that operates on a much, much longer timeline.
Yes, moving from the dense urban reality of Mumbai to the incredibly remote, fragile ecosystem of Great Nicobar Island.
Right. It's a conflict between immense industrial scale and hard ecological limits.
This is a classic structural crisis. It's the exact friction point where the aggressive expansion of capital collides with the finite carrying capacity of a natural environment.
And the specifics are just staggering. The government is pushing a 92,000 crore rupee transshipment port project in Great Nicobar. It's massive.
Right, heavily linked to the Adani Group. And to build this, an estimated 1 million trees are slated to be felled. 1 million trees.
Yeah.
Congress leader Pargav Valuru has launched a fierce opposition campaign against it. And he's attacking the core legal mechanism of how this project was approved, citing a flawed approval process.
Yes.
But how does a project of this magnitude get approved if the local opposition is this intense?
By utilizing the bureaucratic mechanics of environmental clearance to basically bypass genuine consent.
How so?
In many large-scale infrastructure projects, the mandatory public hearings are treated as administrative hurdles rather than democratic consultations.
So they just check a box.
Exactly. They are often held in locations that are physically difficult for indigenous communities to reach.
Oh, wow.
The technical documents detailing the environmental impact might not even be translated into local dialects.
That's incredibly frustrating.
And critically, the minutes of these meetings are often curated by the administration to minimize recorded dissent.
So the clearance becomes a rubber stamp. It technically fulfills the legal requirement while completely violating the spirit of public participation.
That is a deeply cynical use of the law. Valuru points out that Rahul Gandhi recently visited the island to highlight this exact marginalization.
He did.
But, I find Valuru's rhetorical strategy here pretty brilliant because he doesn't just treat Great Nicobar as an isolated tragedy.
No, he expands it.
He connects the felling of those million trees directly to the rising pollution and the intense heat waves currently choking the Indian mainland. He is attempting to build a bridge of consequence.
It's a very specific proxy argument.
Right, but from a purely scientific standpoint, does cutting trees on a remote island actually impact the weather in Delhi or Andhra Pradesh?
The mechanism he is invoking is the integrity of the global climate system.
Okay.
So while cutting a million trees in the Andaman and Nicobar archipelago won't directly cause a heat wave in Delhi tomorrow,
Right, that's not how it works.
it contributes to the systemic degradation of the regional carbon sink.
Which affects everything.
Exactly. Those trees regulate local hydrology and sequester immense amounts of carbon. When you pave over that ecosystem to build a concrete port, you release that carbon and destroy the local cooling effect.
Got it.
Valuru is basically saying to the mainland voter, the heat wave you are suffering today is the cumulative result of prioritizing industrial profit over ecological balance, and this port is the ultimate symbol of that destructive logic.
He's trying to make an abstract environmental cost viscerally real for the average voter.
Yes.
He's even calling on Andhra Pradesh Chief Minister N. Chandrababu Naidu to join the opposition and form a parliamentary forum. He's really trying to force a national debate on the boundaries of corporate expansion.
Because the timeline of consequence is totally asymmetrical.
What do you mean by asymmetrical?
Well, the corporate entities building the port will realize their financial returns within a decade.
Right.
But the ecological damage, the loss of ancient biodiversity, the disruption of indigenous tribal life that is effectively permanent.
What?
And the political system struggles to regulate this because election cycles are 5 years long, while ecological cycles are measured in centuries.
That is a really sobering reality. We are debating how much of our domestic environment we're willing to sacrifice for economic gain.
Yeah.
But the irony is, while the government is allegedly fast-tracking corporate access to Great Nicobar, they're simultaneously building massive, impenetrable fortresses to keep foreign corporate access out of the mainland.
It's a fascinating pivot.
Right. That brings us to our next major theme, redrawing the lines of international investment and security.
We're transitioning from ecological defense to economic defense.
Yeah.
And the primary instrument of this defense is the Foreign Exchange Management Act, specifically the rules governing foreign direct investment, or FDI.
Our sources detail a May 2 notification from the Finance Ministry that dramatically tightens FDI rules for any country sharing a land border with India. It is explicitly aimed at Pakistan, though it covers China and others. Under these new rules, any Pakistani entity or citizen can only invest in India through the strict government approval route.
Correct.
Furthermore, they are completely barred from sensitive sectors like defense, space, and atomic energy.
Which is a hard boundary.
It is. Now, I understand the concept of a financial filter, but how does a hostile actor actually try to circumvent these rules? I mean, if I am a restricted entity, I wouldn't just wire money directly from a bank in Islamabad.
Exactly, which is why the structural mechanics of this notification are so critical. Hostile or opportunistic state actors utilize complex corporate camouflage.
Okay.
Think of corporate structure like a set of Russian nesting dolls.
I like that analogy.
A wealthy individual or a state-backed fund in a restricted country might set up a blind trust in the Cayman Islands.
Right.
That trust then capitalizes a holding company in Mauritius.
Okay.
That holding company then creates a venture capital arm in Dubai, which finally attempts to acquire a sensitive Indian tech startup. If the Indian government only looks at the outermost doll, the Dubai entity, the investment looks perfectly clean.
So how does the May 2 notification actually stop that?
By mandating the tracing of beneficial ownership.
Beneficial ownership?
Yes, this is the legal mechanism of smashing every single nesting doll until you find the actual human being or state entity sitting at the very center, holding the ultimate purse strings.
Wow.
The new rules dictate that if the beneficial owner, regardless of how many intermediary shell companies exist, is a citizen of a land-bordering country, the entire investment is flagged.
And forced into the slow route.
Exactly, the rigorous government approval route.
And the government route isn't just a paperwork delay. It involves deep vetting by the Ministry of Home Affairs and intelligence agencies to ensure the money isn't a Trojan horse for espionage or economic sabotage.
It's a thorough scrub.
They even close the downstream loopholes. The sources state that if an existing approved foreign company in India is later sold, and that transfer shifts the beneficial ownership to a restricted country, that secondary sale also requires government clearance.
Yes.
It is a comprehensive financial firewall.
It is the permanent institutionalization of a defensive posture that actually began during the April 2020 COVID-19 crash.
Oh, right, when valuations dropped.
Exactly. Indian asset valuations plummeted, and the government feared predatory takeovers from Chinese capital.
But I want to highlight a glaring paradox in the source material. On the exact same day, the finance ministry is locking down the borders with these beneficial ownership rules.
Yeah.
Another policy allows 100% FDI under the automatic route for the insurance sector, excluding LIC, which is capped at 20%.
Right.
I find this deeply contradictory. How can a nation simultaneously execute a policy of extreme financial paranoia and extreme financial liberalization?
I wouldn't call it contradictory. Actually, I would call it targeted decoupling.
Targeted decoupling.
Yes. The mechanisms serve entirely different national imperatives. The insurance sector requires deep, patient, long-term capital to mature.
Okay.
And domestic Indian capital markets alone just cannot supply it. Allowing 100% automatic FDI in insurance from Western or allied nations is a desperate bid for growth.
Well, the border restrictions are for security.
Exactly. The restrictions on land-bordering countries are a hard security imperative. It is the state asserting that not all money is equal.
That makes sense.
Capital from a Canadian pension fund builds infrastructure. Capital from a hostile neighbor's state-backed enterprise is viewed as a latent security threat.
So they are actively curating the globalization of their economy. And the reason they are so hypervigilant about Pakistan specifically isn't just historical animosity.
No, not at all.
It is driven by a very present, shifting military reality. While India builds financial walls, the United States is actively upgrading Pakistan's physical military capabilities.
Which forces a complete recalculation of India's strategic defense posture. I mean, economic boundaries only matter if your military boundaries are secure.
Right. According to our sources, the U.S. just awarded a $488 million contract to Northrop Grumman to upgrade the radar systems on Pakistan's fleet of F-16 fighter jets.
That's a massive upgrade.
It covers somewhere between 75 and 85 aircraft, and the engineering support is slated to run for a full decade until March 2036.
Wow.
And this follows a $686 million package proposed back in December 2025. I want to understand the tactical reality of this. Upgrading a radar sounds routine, like, updating software on your phone. Why does this trigger such severe anxiety in New Delhi?
Because in modern aerial warfare, the aerodynamic airframe of the jet is almost secondary to the sensors it carries.
Really?
Yes. The $488 million isn't for routine maintenance. It is likely integrating advanced active electronically scanned array, or AWISA technology.
Okay, explain the mechanics of EASA radar for me. How does it change the fight?
Well, traditional radar uses a physical dish that mechanically sweeps back and forth, emitting a single beam of radio waves. It's relatively slow and easy for modern defense systems to detect and jam.
Okay.
An AES radar has no moving parts. It's a flat panel embedded with thousands of microscopic, solid-state transmitter-receiver modules.
Wow.
Each module can emit its own independent signal at different frequencies. This allows the radar beam to be steered electronically in a fraction of a millisecond.
Which means what for the pilot?
It means an F-16 pilot with AES can simultaneously track 24 enemy aircraft.
24.
Yeah, and guide multiple beyond visual range air-to-air missiles to different targets and actively jam the radar of an incoming Indian fighter, all while remaining highly resistant to being jammed themselves.
That's terrifying.
It doesn't just update the plane, it exponentially multiplies the lethality of the entire 85 jet fleet.
And the timing is explosive. The sources note this upgrade comes in the aftermath of Operation Sindoor, where India conducted missile strikes on terror hubs and military assets deep inside Pakistan.
The airspace is already incredibly contested.
Exactly. But the real vulnerability for India is their own math. The Indian Air Force's authorized squadron strength, basically the minimum calculated need to fight a simultaneous two-front war against Pakistan and China, is 42 squadrons.
Yes.
The sources highlight that they currently possess only 29.
That is a staggering deficit. A squadron is roughly 18 combat aircraft. So being 13 squadrons short means India has a deficit of over 200 fighter jets.
Wow.
When you are operating with a severely depleted defensive umbrella, any technological enhancement given to your primary adversary is viewed as an existential threat.
But this forces me to ask, why is the U.S. doing this? The U.S. isn't blind to India's squadron deficit or the regional tension.
No, they're fully aware.
The sources mentioned Northrop Grumman is also doing this work for Bahrain, Israel, South Korea. It's a global contract, but including Pakistan is a deliberate choice.
Very deliberate.
Is the U.S. simply prioritizing the profits of its military-industrial complex over its strategic partnership with India? Or is there a deeper diplomatic mechanism at play, considering our sources also mentioned Pakistan recently hosted U.S. and Iranian delegations for peace talks?
It is the cold mechanics of geopolitical leverage.
Okay.
The Pentagon and the State Department view maintaining a baseline of operational cooperation with the Pakistani military establishment as a completely necessary tool.
Because of geography?
Because Pakistan controls vital geography and access points to Afghanistan, and as you noted, serves as a back-channel conduit to Tehran.
I see.
The radar upgrade is the currency the U.S. uses to buy that access and cooperation.
So the U.S. is essentially managing its own Middle Eastern security dilemmas by subsidizing a security dilemma for India.
That is precisely how New Delhi perceives it. It is a stark reminder that despite all the rhetoric of the U.S.-India strategic partnership, Washington will act purely in its own transactional self-interest when navigating the broader region.
And speaking of navigating the region, India's western border isn't the only one requiring intense management right now.
No, it's not.
Let's move to a situation that feels less like a high-tech arms race and more like a bizarre bureaucratic standoff. The border with Nepal has historically been porous and culturally intertwined.
Yes, very open.
But right now, it is completely frozen over a dispute rooted in a 200-year-old treaty.
The current diplomatic freeze with Nepal is a fascinating example of how historical cartography can be weaponized for modern populist politics.
Right. So the core issue revolves around the Kailash Manasarovar Yatra, which is a major Hindu pilgrimage. The route travels through the Kalapani Limpiadhur Lipulik region.
Yes.
Ahead of a scheduled visit by Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri, the government in Kathmandu formally conveyed strong objections to both India and China about the yatra using this specific route.
Right.
Nepal is invoking the 1816 Treaty of Sugauli, claiming the territory east of the Mahakali River is theirs. India completely rejects this, citing a 1954 pilgrimage route. How does a treaty from 1816 create a crisis in 2026?
Well, the mechanism of the dispute lies in the physical geography of rivers and the imprecision of colonial mapmaking.
Okay, mapmaking.
The 1816 Treaty of Sugauli ended the Anglo-Nepalese War and designated the Mahakali River as the western boundary of Nepal.
Sounds straightforward.
But rivers are not static black lines. They have complex ecological systems. The Mahakali has multiple tributaries originating in the high Himalayas.
Oh, I see where this is going.
The entire territorial dispute hinges on which specific tributary you legally define as the true source of the river.
Wow.
Depending on that definition, the entire triangular landmass of Kalapani shifts from Indian jurisdiction to Nepalese jurisdiction.
It's a debate over hydrology disguised as a border conflict.
Exactly.
But what makes this situation truly unprecedented is the mechanism the new Nepalese Prime Minister Balender Shah is using to handle it.
Yes.
He isn't engaging in tense negotiations. He is simply refusing to talk.
Complete silence.
The sources describe a strict protocol where he will not meet with any foreign envoys, ostensibly to focus on domestic governance. He literally ghosted senior U.S. officials, Assistant Secretary of State Paul Kapoor, and Special Envoy Sergio Gore.
Ghosting superpowers is a highly aggressive diplomatic mechanism.
It really is.
Prime Minister Shah has instituted a year-long moratorium on overseas travel for his leadership. This is deliberate, calculated isolationism.
But what is the strategic advantage of self-isolation for a landlocked country that is heavily dependent on trade with India and aid from the U.S.?
The advantage is entirely domestic.
Playing to the base.
Yes. By refusing to meet with the U.S. or India, Shah projects an image of untouchable sovereignty to his domestic base. He signaled that he will not be bullied or pressured by larger powers.
It's a populist flex.
It is a populist flex. The incident you mentioned where the Nepali side deliberately displayed a map claiming the disputed territory during a meeting with the U.S. envoy is part of that same theatrical posturing.
But the cost of that theater is administrative paralysis, isn't it? If Indian Foreign Secretary Vikram Misri arrives in Kathmandu, but the Prime Minister refuses to engage, how do you resolve anything?
You don't.
A border dispute can't be solved by lower-level bureaucrats who lack the authority to make concessions. It reduces diplomacy to shouting across a locked door.
Which means the friction will only compound. As we saw, it even bleeds into the private sector, like Nepal Airlines having to apologize for accidentally using a map showing Jammu and Kashmir as part of Pakistan.
Right.
When the top level of government refuses to communicate, paranoia and minor errors escalate into full-blown diplomatic incidents.
It's literally a masterclass in how not to manage a border. Now, let's widen our scope significantly. We have discussed the mechanics of domestic governance, corporate expansion, and regional border disputes.
Yes.
But for segment 3, we are going to look at what happens when the absolute most critical maritime boundary on the planet is choked off. We are talking about the Strait of Hormuz.
If the Nepal border is a localized diplomatic headache, the Strait of Hormuz is the jugular vein of the global macroeconomy.
The situation our sources describe is apocalyptic for global logistics. There are currently 850 massive commercial ships trapped in the Gulf.
That's a staggering number.
We are talking about an estimated 20,000 sailors stranded in a highly militarized zone, and the immediate global reaction is brutal. Oil prices have spiked past $120 a barrel.
Yeah.
Explain the physical mechanics of this choke point to me. Why can't these ships just sail around the problem?
Because of the unforgiving realities of maritime geography. The Strait of Hormuz is the only sea passage from the Persian Gulf to the open ocean.
There's no other way.
None. At its narrowest point, the strait is only 21 miles wide. But the actual deepwater shipping lanes, the only paths deep enough for massive supertankers, are just 2 miles wide in either direction.
Just 2 miles.
Just 2 miles. It is a needle's eye. Roughly a quarter of all global oil consumption must thread that needle every single day. If a state actor decides to mine those 2 miles, or deploy fast attack craft to harass vessels, the entire global energy supply chain halts instantly. There's no alternative route.
And the timeline reveals a complete breakdown of international conflict resolution here. Iran initiated a blockade on foreign shipping on February 28, following an attack by U.S. and Israeli forces.
Right.
Former President Donald Trump, who is back in office, instituted a U.S. counter-blockade on April 13th. A Pakistani attempt to broker a ceasefire managed to start the active shooting, but it completely failed to reopen the strait.
It's a stalemate.
It is a massive Mexican standoff, and into this vacuum, Trump announces Project Freedom.
Which is a quintessential example of Trump's diplomatic mechanism.
Right.
Erratic escalation presented as humanitarian intervention.
He announced that the U.S. military will actively guide these 850 trapped ships out of the strait, framing it as a rescue mission for the stranded sailors. He claims the U.S. is having very positive discussions with Iran. But simultaneously, he threatens overwhelming force against any entity that interferes with the convoy. How do you physically guide 850 supertankers through a contested 2-mile lane?
The logistics of a naval convoy on that scale are just a nightmare. You would need destroyers and frigates flanking miles-long lines of slow-moving cargo ships, providing anti-air and anti-surface screens.
That's a massive deployment.
But the real mechanism at play here is insurance.
Insurance.
Even if the U.S. Navy offers an escort, maritime insurance syndicates like Lloyd's of London would likely skyrocket the war risk premiums to levels that make moving the cargo financially ruinous.
Oh, wow.
The shipping companies might refuse to move even with an escort.
And we have to look at why Trump is forcing the issue right now. The sources detail a convergence of immense pressures. Domestically, $120 oil is political poison.
Absolutely.
But he's also dealing with the massive geopolitical fallout of his own making. He apparently issued a surprise order to withdraw 5,000 U.S. troops from Germany, blindsiding the Pentagon and infuriating lawmakers who see it as a gift to Russia. Is Project Freedom just a massive aircraft carrier-sized distraction from his European blunders?
It is entirely plausible. Deploying 3 aircraft carriers to the Middle East, a concentration of naval power we haven't seen there since the early 2000s, is a massive projection of strength designed to dominate the news cycle.
Right.
He is attempting to artificially force a resolution to ease domestic pump prices and look decisive. But he's applying this pressure against a deeply entrenched adversary.
Because Iran is not backing down. They proposed a 14-point peace plan via the Pakistani mediators, focusing strictly on maritime security and lifting the blockade.
Yes.
But the U.S. administration countered by demanding that any deal must also include strict limits on Iran's nuclear program. Iran flatly refused, stating the nuclear issue is non-negotiable in this context.
Which complicates everything.
And Iranian officials explicitly warned that any unilateral U.S. attempt to move ships will be treated as a violation of the fragile ceasefire.
This is the exact danger of conflating separate strategic issues. By linking the reopening of a global trade artery to complex nuclear negotiations, the U.S. ensures neither problem gets solved.
It creates a diplomatic dead end.
It does. With Israeli forces on high alert and continuing strikes in Lebanon, any miscalculation, a warning shot that hits a tanker, a drone flying too close to a U.S. carrier, could instantly ignite a regional war.
It exposes the ultimate fragility of our modern world. We boast about a borderless, highly optimized global economy, but it all relies on the implicit assumption that a 2-mile stretch of water will remain peaceful.
The moment geography is weaponized, globalization collapses.
And speaking of weaponizing geography, let's move from the physical threat of a Middle Eastern blockade to the conceptual threat of ideological extremism operating across borders. Our sources bring us to Canada.
This represents a profound shift in how a Western intelligence apparatus defines internal and external security boundaries.
The Canadian Security Intelligence Service, CSIS, has released its 2025 public report. And in a major pivot, they have officially designated Khalistani extremists as a national security threat.
A huge change.
The report accuses these Canada-based networks of engaging in violent activities, exploiting Canadian democratic institutions, and covertly diverting community funds to finance violence directed at India.
To grasp the magnitude of this designation, we really have to look at the historical friction it addresses.
Right.
The Khalistan movement seeks a sovereign Sikh state separate from India. New Delhi has long classified these separatist elements as terrorist organizations and has spent decades deeply frustrated by what it views as Ottawa's permissive attitude toward these groups, often defended under the umbrella of Canadian free speech laws.
And we know exactly how toxic that friction became. The sources reference the 2023 crisis under former Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, where he publicly alleged Indian state involvement in the killing of a Sikh separatist on Canadian soil. India vehemently denied it, leading to a massive diplomatic implosion, expelled diplomats, visa suspensions, total gridlock. My question is, how does this new CSIS report alter that deeply damaged architecture?
It alters it by signaling a total regime change in diplomatic priorities. We are now analyzing the administration of Prime Minister Mark Carney.
Great.
Carney recognizes that the diplomatic freeze with India, a rising global economic powerhouse, is unsustainable for Canadian interests.
So this is a concession.
By allowing CSIS to formally label these specific violent actors as a national security threat, Carney is executing a massive concession to New Delhi. He is validating their core security anxiety.
But it's a very carefully calibrated concession. The report explicitly draws a boundary between violence and speech.
It does.
It states that peaceful, nonviolent advocacy for an independent Khalistan is not considered extremism. They are attempting to thread the needle, aggressively dismantling the financial and operational networks that fund violence while strictly protecting the constitutional right to political expression. But how do intelligence agencies practically enforce that boundary? I mean, how do you distinguish between a community fundraiser for political advocacy and one that covertly funds a militant cell?
That is the hardest mechanism of intelligence gathering. It requires deep financial forensics.
Following the money.
Exactly. It means tracing the flow of cash from a community hall in Toronto through Hawala networks or shell charities to the procurement of weapons or the funding of sleeper cells in Punjab. It requires infiltrating the networks to understand intent, not just monitoring speech.
And CSIS grounds this aggressive new posture in a very specific historical trauma, The report explicitly invokes the 1985 bombing of Air India Flight 182.
Which is vital context.
Yeah.
That bombing was orchestrated by Canada-based Khalistani extremists. It killed 329 people, mostly Canadian citizens, and remains the deadliest act of terrorism in Canadian history.
Right.
By referencing 1985, CSIS is communicating to the Canadian public that this designation isn't just about appeasing India's foreign policy demands, it is about preventing a domestic catastrophe.
It brings it home.
It is a reminder that harboring extremism, even if it is directed outward, eventually poisons the host nation.
It is a stark drawing of a red line. Now, as we navigate these incredibly fraught international dynamics, blockades, intelligence designations, military standoffs, I want to pivot to a relationship that relies on a completely different mechanism of engagement.
Okay.
Because international relations aren't solely defined by friction, they are also built on enduring human infrastructure.
You are referring to the deployment of soft power and historical continuity.
Exactly. Our sources highlight recent remarks by External Affairs Minister S. Jaishankar regarding the bilateral relationship between India and Jamaica.
Yeah.
He described the relationship as a blend of continuity and change. Let's examine the continuity first, because it is rooted in an astonishing timeline. A 180-year-old Indian diaspora in Jamaica.
The history there is complex.
Yeah.
We are talking about the 1840s, the era of indentured servitude, where Indian laborers were transported across the globe to work on colonial plantations.
Despite that painful origin, Jaishankar emphasizes how that diaspora has evolved over nearly 2 centuries into a vital cultural bridge, fostering immense goodwill and a shared Commonwealth identity.
It's an incredible evolution.
It is a human foundation that transcends modern political cycles.
But historical sentiment is not a strategy. The change aspect of his formulation is where the modern geopolitical mechanics come into play.
Right. Jaishankar detailed a modern partnership focused on capacity building. We are talking about collaboration in digital technology, healthcare, education, and climate resilience.
Yes.
This isn't just nostalgia, it is highly pragmatic. How does India leverage this kind of developmental assistance to achieve broader strategic goals on the global stage?
It is the mechanism of South-South cooperation. Historically, a country's influence in regions like the Caribbean was often maintained through military presence or coercive economic debt traps.
Like we've seen with other powers.
Exactly. India is utilizing a different model. By sharing its success in building digital public infrastructure, think of the mechanics behind the UPI payment system or digital identity frameworks. India provides tangible, transformative value to smaller nations.
It's exporting solutions.
When India helps Jamaica digitize its economy or build climate-resilient agriculture, it generates profound, actionable goodwill.
And that goodwill translates into diplomatic capital at the United Nations, right?
Absolutely.
When India seeks a permanent seat on the UN Security Council or attempts to reshape global trade regulations, having a solid bloc of Caribbean and Global South nations voting in alignment is invaluable. They are taking a 180-year-old cultural artifact and engineering it into a modern engine of geopolitical influence.
It is a brilliant demonstration of how the invisible boundaries of shared development can be just as potent as the hard borders of military alliances.
We have covered an immense expanse of the global operating system today. We've dissected the logistics of massive elections, the financial firewalls of FDI, the geography of maritime choke points, and the forensic boundaries of extremism.
Which leads us to the final segment of our analysis. We are moving from the macro systems of statecraft to the micro moments, where the limits of physics, technology, and human behavior are fundamentally tested.
We are going to start with a terrifying moment of extreme human distress that managed to paralyze a major node of international infrastructure.
This is a wild story.
We are at Chennai International Airport. It is 3 a.m. on a Sunday. An Air Arabia flight arriving from Sharjah has just landed and is taxiing toward the terminal. There are 231 passengers on board.
Okay.
And suddenly, a 34-year-old male passenger manages to open an emergency exit door and jumps out of the moving aircraft.
Wow. The physiological panic in that cabin would have been instantaneous.
I can't even imagine.
The taxiing phase is an incredibly vulnerable mechanical state. The aircraft is on the ground, but the massive jet engines are still ingesting huge amounts of air, and the plane is moving at significant speed.
The pilot executed an immediate emergency braking maneuver, halting the aircraft right on the runway. Security was alerted, and the response was overwhelming.
As it should be.
The Central Industrial Security Force, the CISF, alongside bomb disposal units and armed squads, swarmed the plane. They had no idea if this was a coordinated terror attack, a hijacking, or a mechanical failure.
Right, they have to assume the worst.
As a direct result, the main runway of one of India's most critical aviation hubs was entirely shut down for a full hour, from 3:23 a.m. to 4:23 a.m.
Miraculously, the sources report the man did not sustain serious injuries, and the aircraft's structural integrity wasn't compromised. He was detained, and the investigation revealed this wasn't terrorism, but an acute medical and psychological crisis.
The man, a resident of Tamil Nadu, had been exhibiting signs of severe distress during the flight. He complained of a violent vomiting sensation and had actually been sick twice.
Oh, wow.
Authorities suspect this intense physical illness, perhaps combined with a sudden wave of severe claustrophobia or panic, triggered a complete breakdown in his impulse control, leading him to pull the emergency lever.
This incident really exposes a massive gap in standard aviation safety protocols.
How so?
The industry has perfected the mechanics of pre-flight security screening to keep weapons off a plane. But how does a flight crew manage a passenger undergoing a severe psychological break, especially during the taxiing phase?
Right.
During taxiing, protocols dictate that flight attendants must be securely strapped into their jump seats and passengers must remain belted. The crew's ability to physically intervene is intentionally restricted by safety rules.
Exactly. You can't just shout, "The seatbelt sign is on," to someone experiencing a panic attack who is actively grabbing the door handle. And you can't mechanically lock an emergency exit from the cockpit because, by law, it must remain easily openable in case of a crash or fire. It's a terrifying paradox.
It really is.
The actions of one individual pushed past their biological limits, completely overrode the safety architecture of a multi-million-dollar machine, and paralyzed a global transit hub. But if that is an example of human limits causing a system to fail, our next story is about human ingenuity pushing technological limits to an absolute triumph.
This is undoubtedly the most significant technological breakthrough in today's material. We are looking at the private space sector, specifically a Bengaluru-based startup called Galaxy, and their successful launch of Mission Drishti.
On May 3, Mission Drishti was launched into orbit aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket from California. It is a 190-kilogram satellite, making it India's largest privately built Earth observation spacecraft.
That's a major milestone.
But the weight isn't what matters. The payload is the breakthrough. Mission Drishti is officially the world's first OptoSAR satellite. I need you to break down the physics of this for me. What exactly does OptoSAR mean, and why is it revolutionary?
To understand the breakthrough, we have to look at the historical limitations of satellite imaging. Historically, we had two distinct types of sensors. The first is electro-optical, the opto part.
Okay.
Think of this as an incredibly powerful, hyper-advanced DSLR camera in space. It captures stunning, high-resolution visual images of the Earth's surface. But it has a fatal flaw. It operates on the visible light spectrum.
Which means?
If it is nighttime, it sees nothing. If there is a massive hurricane or thick cloud cover over the target area, the optical camera is completely blind.
So it only works on sunny days? What is the alternative?
The alternative is synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. A SAR satellite doesn't use light. It actively beams microwave pulses down to the Earth and precisely measures the backscatter, the echo that bounces back.
Like sonar, sort of.
Exactly. Because microwaves have a much longer wavelength than visible light, they easily penetrate darkness, thick smoke, and heavy clouds. SAR provides an all-weather 247 imaging capability.
That sounds perfect.
However, the resulting data doesn't look like a photograph. It looks like a textured, monochromatic topographical map. It provides structural data, but lacks visual clarity.
I see the problem. You have one sensor that provides great pictures but is defeated by clouds, and another that defeats clouds but doesn't give you a clear visual picture.
Precisely. For decades, if military intelligence or agricultural scientists wanted a complete picture of an area, they had to task two separate satellites to fly over the same coordinates, download the massive data set separately, and then try to mathematically fuse the optical and radar imagery on computers down on Earth.
That sounds inefficient.
It was expensive, slow, and computationally agonized.
And Galaxy solved this.
They engineered a masterpiece. Mission Drishti integrates both the electro-optical sensor and the synthetic aperture radar onto a single 190-kilogram platform. The satellite physically captures both the visual data and the structural microwave data of the exact same target simultaneously. The internal processing then fuses those datasets in orbit. It delivers high-resolution, visually interpretable images through cloud cover in the dead of night.
That is astonishing. The CEO, Suyash Singh, noted this took over 5 years of grueling R&D. The applications are limitless. If you are the military, you can track enemy naval movements through a monsoon.
Exactly.
If you are a civil authority, you can instantly assess the structural damage of a flooded city while the storm is still raging overhead. Dr. Pawan Goenka, the chairman of InSpace, highlighted that this proves the maturity of India's private space sector.
It's a huge shift.
These startups aren't just manufacturing nuts and bolts for ISRO anymore. They are designing and operating world-first, complex orbital mechanics that outpace legacy global competitors.
It is the commercialization of the ultimate high ground. They have fundamentally redrawn the boundaries of what a private company can observe from low Earth orbit.
And before we close out this deep dive, I want to bring us all the way back down from orbit to examine a very terrestrial boundary: the 22 yards of a cricket pitch.
Ah, yes.
Our sources gave us the tactical breakdown of two incredibly tense IPL thrillers, where the physical limits of the athletes and the geometry of the game were pushed to the edge.
The mechanics of T20 cricket offer a brilliant microcosm of pressure management and environmental adaptation.
Let's start with the Gujarat Titans taking on the Punjab Kings in Ahmedabad. GT secures a nail-biting victory by 4 wickets, chasing 164 with just 1 ball left.
That was close.
This was PBKS's second consecutive loss after a dominant start to the season. The primary antagonist in this match wasn't a player, it was the pitch itself. It was a black soil deck offering vicious, steep bounce and aggressive seam movement. Explain the geology here. Why does black soil behave like a trampoline?
Black cotton soil is rich in a specific clay mineral called montmorillonite.
Montmorillonite, okay.
This clay has a high swelling capacity when it absorbs moisture and shrinks significantly when it dries, creating a highly bound, incredibly hard surface.
Right.
When a fast bowler hits the deck hard, the ball doesn't bite into the pitch and slow down. It skids and accelerates upward off that hard clay surface, resulting in steep, unpredictable bounce.
And the GT fast bowlers utilize that perfectly. Mohammad Siraj and Kagisa Rabada absolutely dismantled the PBKS top order. They reduced them to 35 for 3 in the power play. There's a specific detail here. Rabada dismissed Prabhsimran Singh with a delivery that clocked 152 kilometers per hour.
That is searing pace.
Put me in the batter's box. What is the physical reality of facing 152 kph delivery on a black soil pitch?
It tests the absolute limits of human reaction time. At 152 kph, a batter has roughly 0.4 seconds from the moment the ball leaves the bowler's hand to the moment it passes the stumps.
0.4 seconds.
When that ball hits a hard black soil pitch, it doesn't just travel fast, it rears up toward the batter's throat or helmet. You cannot premeditate a shot. You rely entirely on instinct, muscle memory, and elite visual processing to survive.
PBKS managed to scrape to 163, but the GT chase was a masterclass in psychological control. Sai Sudharsan anchored the innings, absorbing the pressure without panicking. It came down to the final over against Marcus Stoinis. GT needed 11 runs.
Back pressure.
Arshad Khan carves a Yorker for 4, and then Washington Sundar ends it by stepping across his stumps and scooping a full toss over fine leg for 6. It was clinical, mechanical execution under ultimate stress.
GT understands that chasing a sub-170 total isn't about raw power. It is about mitigating risk and manipulating the field placements. But the second match we analyzed demands a completely different mechanical explanation.
How so?
It wasn't about the physics of speed. It was about the suffocating geometry of spin.
The Kolkata Knight Riders absolutely demolished the Sunrisers Hyderabad by 7 wickets. SRH came into this game on a 5-match winning streak, looking like an unstoppable offensive machine.
They were terrifying.
Travis Head was destroying the KKR pace attack, blasting a 22-ball half-century. SRH was cruising at 105 for 1 in the 9th over. They looked guaranteed to post over 230.
But the environmental conditions changed the math. The pitch in Hyderabad was slower than usual, likely retaining less moisture, causing the ball to grip and hesitate off the surface rather than coming onto the bat cleanly. And KKR's spin duo, Varun Chakravarti and Sunil Narine, recognized this immediately.
The collapse was spectacular. Varun gets hit for 17 runs by Travis Head, but he maintains his tactical discipline, deceives Head with the next ball, and gets him out.
Which completely shifted the momentum.
That single wicket shatters SRH. Varun starts carving through the middle order. SRH kept trying to hit through the line of the ball, playing aggressive lofted shots, and it backfired horribly. Why does that aggressive technique fail against spin on a slow pitch?
Because the timing mechanics. When a pitch is fast, The ball arrives at the bat precisely when the batter's swing reaches its maximum power arc.
Right, it connects perfectly.
When a pitch is slow and the ball grips the surface, it arrives a fraction of a second later than the batter's brain anticipates. If you swing aggressively through the line, your bat completes its arc before the ball is there, resulting in a mistimed shot that invariably loops up for an easy catch.
Ah, I see.
You have to wait on the ball, play late, and use the crease, which SRH completely failed to do.
And then you have the mastery of Sunil Narine. He claims his 200 IPL wicket in this match by bowling Salil Arora with a delivery that swerved and drifted perfectly. Together, Varun and Narine shared 5 wickets. They engineered a catastrophic collapse.
You did it?
SRH went from 105 for 1 to being bowled out for 165. They lost 9 wickets for just 60 runs.
It was a tactical strangulation. KKR recognized that the boundary of success had shifted from raw power hitting to geometric precision, and they exploited it ruthlessly. Finn Allen and Ajinkya Rahane then easily chased the target down for KKR. It proves that in elite competition, adaptability always defeats rigid aggression.
Which perfectly brings us full circle to the very beginning of our conversation today.
It really ties the entire thematic narrative together.
We started this deep dive talking about the boundaries we draw, how we expect them to be clean, permanent lines on a map, but how they are actually complex, shifting mechanisms that require constant negotiation.
Yes.
We examined the massive logistical defense of democratic elections. We analyzed the tragic consequences when the boundary of trust breaks between a grieving community and the police force meant to protect them. We looked at the legal firewalls built to block foreign capital, the geopolitical red lines being violently contested in the Strait of Hormuz, and the technological limits being completely shattered by a satellite in orbit.
Every single event we analyze today, from the macro level of international diplomacy to the micro level of a cricket pitch, was fundamentally a story about control.
Absolutely.
It was an exploration of who possesses the authority to establish the boundary, what mechanisms they use to enforce it, and what happens when an internal or external force inevitably disrupts it.
And as we close the book on this extensive stack of sources from May 4th, 2026, I want to sincerely thank you, the listener, for enduring this journey with us. We know we unpack an immense amount of dense mechanical detail, but understanding the how and the why beneath the headlines is exactly what keeps you informed and ahead of the curve.
Definitely.
But before we sign off, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to consider regarding all this information.
We've spent the last hour meticulously analyzing physical borders, legal blockades, and the technological frontiers of space. But considering the intense, often wildly contradictory narratives we see deployed by state actors, like Trump's bizarre mixed signals regarding the Gulf blockade, or a 200-year-old river treaty being weaponized in Nepal, perhaps the most impenetrable boundaries are not the ones physically drawn on a map.
What are you suggesting is harder to pierce than a physical blockade?
The informational boundaries we construct around our own internal national narratives. Every government and every individual exists inside a curated framework of how they believe the world ought to operate.
Right.
When facts contradict that framework, the natural defense mechanism is to reinforce the boundary of the narrative, to ignore the data. So the question becomes, how do you as an individual navigating this incredibly dense, information-heavy world pierce through those official narratives to find the actual ground truth? Because if the map you're using is deliberately flawed, you can't just stare at the lines harder. You have to learn to read the shadows cast by the people drawing them.
That is a phenomenal, unsettling question to end on. Keep looking for those shadows, keep questioning exactly where the lines are drawn, and most importantly, demand to know the mechanics of why they were drawn there in the first place. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive. Stay curious and take care.